It probably doesn't matter, and that's why we don't even need to discuss
I don't think
that he could leave somewhere else.
Saying they don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, but that's the point. If you're saying it doesn't matter, then that speaks to how you feel about them as a hockey market.
Well, you're right. Maybe they're. I just don't know their hockey market to be like they really won over the fan base with that contract and those comments. And I don't know if that happens in Vegas.
I'm just saying, remember Tavares when he came up here? Well, I could have got 13 in San Jose. It's like that was only benefiting Tavares.
Well, you know what I said when that was brought to my attention? I go, that's monkey business. I don't even care about that. They might have made that up.
Right. Well, and it doesn't matter with
13.
Marner. And Marner never got there. But I do wonder, like this would suggest, he obviously was keenly aware that Vegas was in on him and he wanted to go to Vegas. And the question I'm curious about is how long has he made up his mind that was going to be the case? Well, was it last summer? Was it at the trade deadline?
You're really horny about that question.
I'm very curious about it.
Well, keep in mind, Brian, it might have been a higher number had they only had 7 years. The Leafs factoring in on the 8th year is big to bring the AAV down.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. That is a part of it as well, for sure. All right, here's Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider, joining us on the Maple Toyota Hotline. So take us through the timeline here, Chris. Mitch signing an 8-year deal, $12 million per to go to Vegas. What do you know of what's coming back to Toronto, and how long has this been in the works?
I don't know exactly what the trade package is. I mean, it literally is a sign and trade, and what's been done at this point is the sign part. He had to sign an 8-year contract with the Leafs, technically before 11:59 p.m. tonight to do the trade, and so the trade call has yet to happen. I do believe Nicholas Waugh will be part of that deal, which is obviously his name has been attached since the weekend. And, what this does is I don't know if there's more included in that. I mean, this is breaking in real time. What this does is give Mitch Marner the chance to, put this all behind him to get an 8th year, which is what obviously has value. He gets the exact same contract that Mikko Rantanen signed in Dallas after his trade there at the deadline. And, for the Leafs, they're going to get something back. I mean, nothing, obviously, of Mitch Marner quality, but, something is better than nothing.
Yeah,
CJ,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead.
CJ, just as far as Marner and his tenure here in Toronto, how do you think it'll be characterized? Hayes was bringing up the idea of him returning here, this is the end. What will you think the fan base and everybody in general will make of his time here in Toronto?
Well, it's going to be hot for a little while, I would think. I mean, at this point, obviously this is a big move, and this is someone who had the absolute right to free agency, of course, and he used it. But, I think that it's going to leave, there'll be some members of the fan base, I'm sure, that will, remember this, will be, thinking that this should never have happened, that type of thing. And so, we've seen in the past, I would think that whenever Vegas plays its first game in Toronto with Mitch Marner wearing gold, that's going to be, quite an occasion, pretty unique sight. And I would expect a lot of vitriol in the building. But, over time, these things tend to peter out a little bit. I was covering the Leafs daily when Tavares went back to, at the time, was Nassau Coliseum for the first time after signing in Toronto. And you remember people throwing snakes and freaking out in the parking lot. I mean, over the years, he still gets booed there, but it's not quite as passionate. And there's probably a day where, in retirement, John Tavares will be able to do something with the Islanders organization. I think over time, the same thing will happen here for Marner with the Leafs because, whatever you think of the ending, he obviously delivered a lot of memorable moments or times, was part of a very hopeful period for the Leafs. I know, people will also remember the playoff disappointments with this team, and Mitch was, part of those. But, a lot of good things happened here to vault him to 5th in the organization's points list before leaving at age 28.
So the tampering stuff with Vegas, where does this go from here?
I don't know. I think that it will probably subside too, but I can't say that definitively at this point. I guess we'll just have to see when the dust settles. I mean, this was always a unique case. I mean, the Leafs and Golden Knights had talked trade on Marner more than once. They talked about it at the trade deadline as, a potential 3-way trade with Carolina that never came to pass. But obviously during the process of those conversations, it was known that the Vegas wanted Mitch that the Leafs would consider the trade and that Mitch Marner would want to go to Vegas if it could ever happen. And so, it's not as night and day or clear to say, that something, as serious as tampering necessarily happened. I mean, when everybody at the table at least knew that all the things I just listed were true. As I said, I don't have all the information, and I'm not sure where we'll go from here. But the fact that it ends relatively amicably with, getting the team to sign him to that 8-year deal, getting some kind of package back here, which we'll soon find out what the details of that are. All those things I do think suggest to me that there might be some feelings and emotions that involved for everyone here that I don't know that it's going to rise to the level of anything else coming of those allegations.
So we're chatting with Chris Johnston. It just broke that Mitch Marner has completed a sign-and trade with the Leafs in Vegas. 8 years, $12 million per. He's going from Toronto to Vegas. We don't know what's coming back. There are indications coming in now that it sounds like Marchand and Florida are going to figure this out, CJ. So if that happens, let's presume that happens. Brad Marchand returns. Sam Bennett return. Aaron Ekblad return to Florida. If you're Brad Treliving, what do you do now? Like, what is possible for him to do with
what's plan C?
Yeah, what is the next plan? Because, 6 months ago they probably wanted to keep Mitch Marner. 6 minutes ago they were hoping to get Brad Marchand. What does he do now to complete his DNA change?
Well, we'll have to see. Is it on the free agent market or the trade market? Because, free agency, we are still going to have a show tomorrow. There will be free agency, but we're missing a headliner, right? I would say probably the next best option in free agency might be someone like Nikolai Ehlers, very different type of player than Brad Marchand, but, a proven top 6 winger, that has been in the league a long time. And I do think holds some appeal for Toronto, but the problem, of course, is that he holds appeal for other people too, and he's going to have options, and so I certainly don't have enough to say whether what percentage chance the Leafs would have in him, but I would think that he'll at least be someone they're making a call to once he officially hits the market. And beyond that, I do know the Leafs front office has been gearing up for what could be a long summer, that there might be take some time for them to get the roster to a level where they're comfortable with it. I know they're very excited about Matthias Maselli, who they traded for today. Not obviously a huge name necessarily at this point, but he did have a pretty big season a couple years ago, and he's still young in his career and has the ability, I think, to be a top 6 winger for this team. And so, the truth is, it might take some time. I don't know that we're going to get the answer tomorrow. But the Leafs have got a fair bit of business done here in recent days, and they are still armed with cap space to improve their team, even with Brad Marchand not available for them to bid on, and obviously with Marner, leaving town.
That's where I was going to go, Chris. Does that more think that they would sit on this cap space and start to take a look at the trade market, and maybe even into the season, where you've got some teams that they might covet a player or two, but maybe that team is not ready to move away from that player until, we'll call it U.S. Thanksgiving type of thing, where, I think there's teams that think that they're in it right now, but they'll change their mind probably 20 games into the season.
No, they know they're not in it, Jamie. They just want to wait until U.S. Thanksgiving so they prove to their owner that they just had to look at it.
That's. It's fair enough, but I guess that my point is, do you feel like Tree has the flexibility to wait to go into the season to maybe find that right player, that right fit for his organization?
For sure he does. It really comes down to that. Obviously, they have to be good enough to get to the playoffs. Yeah. And I think knowing what we know of the roster, it's not a crazy thought to think that they will be. And they might not even know who the player is yet. That's the reality. They don't necessarily have to have the exact answer to this question. I realize it's not comfortable, and it's probably a hard thing to message publicly to a fan base, because you're losing, an absolute bona fide all-star superstar player in Mitch Marner, and you don't necessarily have the shiny toy to unveil and say, here's his replacement. But, we're moving into a different era, I think, in the NHL. It's been a pretty crazy few days. I feel like I've been drinking from a fire hose here And, we have the cap going up, and I just think there's going to be more player movement than we've had in some of the recent past. And I do believe it's going to continue, not saying it's happening tomorrow. Obviously, tomorrow is really a day dedicated to signings, but, you get on the other side of the July 4th weekend, the U.S. teams are going to be looking for other ways to fill their needs, and I do think there's a possibility Toronto's among them, and more shakes out. So, I do think that the Leafs, one of the benefits of having a GM like Brad Treliving, he's a very experienced guy, pretty calm, at the controls, and he's not going to force anything or make a bad decision just because of the emotion and everything swirling around right now. I think that he'll be patient, and, the Leafs have seldom had cap space, as we all know, for a long, long